everybody, and welcome to a brand new Aspire to Inspire podcast episode. My name is Lottie Bazley, and I'm a senior internal communications manager at Staffbase. And with us today, we have Marc Wright, who I have had the pleasure of meeting a few times actually at various Simply events. So today, Marc, we are going to be chatting all things digital strategy, leadership communications, and particularly the kind of good, bad, and ugly in these areas. But before we get into all of that, it would be great if you could give us a bit of an introduction to yourself.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you very much, Lottie. Yeah, so I'm Marc Wright from Simply. So Simply Communicate. We're a community of about 8,000 communicators around the world who read our stuff and listen to what we have to say and come to our events in London. And we not only talk about the space where digital workplace joins internal comms. That's our space. So digital workplace, internal communications, where those overlap, that's where Simply operates. And we don't just run events and talk a lot and publish a lot of stuff. We also help large organizations put in digital workplaces. So we've just finished one for a large global bank, and that's over about 300,000 people down to 3,000 people. So about the full range. And of course, work with Staffbase as well on some of those.
Absolutely, yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the Aspire to
My
Inspire
pleasure.
podcast. So as people are here to be inspired, let's get straight into it if you're ready.
Okay.
Fab. So I know you have an extensive background in internal communications and particularly digital strategy, as you mentioned. So what I'd love to explore a bit today is the topic of hyper-personalization. So I know it's a term that I've kind of heard a little bit around and something that pops up on LinkedIn every now and again. So before we get deep into it, it'd be great if you could kind of just explain a bit about what that means to you, hyper-personalization.
Yes, of course. Now, hyper-personalization obviously comes from external media. So think of an example. Let's say, take Nike. So if Nike wants to get to you, they don't wait for you to go onto the Nike website, and they'll get to you via Instagram or Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. But they know when you'll be on those platforms and when you're most likely to be in the point of view of actually buying something. And so hyper-personalization is using audience data to target your messages. And it's been, as you know, it's been going for years in social media, and it's driven organizations to great wealth like Google, but it's only really appeared in internal communications in the past couple of years. So up until now, it's been one size fits all. You get a portal, you get an intranet, but now we have the same tools at our disposal to really target messages. We create the messages, but we can shoot them off in different ways, depending on when Lottie likes to get her stuff, whether it's on the train going home, whether it's when you're walking the dog, doing the washing up, or whatever it might be. So hyper-personalization is really talking to an audience of one.
Mm-hmm. Fab. Thank you so much for going through that. And I think I'm a big advocate of, when people are in work versus when they're out of work, that they shouldn't feel like they're being communicated to in any kind of a different way. So
Yeah.
absolutely would make sense that we're kind of bringing that hyper-personalization into internal communications. But maybe if we explore a bit about when it comes to leadership communications specifically, have you seen any examples where this hyper-personalization has gone really well, maybe not so well, for leadership comms?
That's a good question. In generally speaking, hyper-personalization is the enemy of leadership comms, because what we do in internal comms is we take the important stuff and we push it out to the organization. We make it as interesting as we possibly can. But if I'm personalizing stuff, so if I select the channels that I want to listen to, you know what? It's quite unlikely that I'm going to click on internal comms, global news. So even if we default that, and people can get around that, personalization does tend to, it makes people, as we do in social media, live in a particular bubble. So it's a real challenge for leadership comms to get through to people once you start using these techniques. And the reason why we use these techniques is because engagement levels are much higher. So if I have stuff pushed to me, which is of interest to me, it's to do with my job, it's to do with where I work and so on, I'm more likely to read it. By the same token, I'm less likely to read the global stuff. And so we have to recalibrate the way that we go about leadership comms once these new tools are around. And it's relatively new. As I said, it's only in the past couple of years we've had these tools. So it's quite hard to find great examples. But I do go back to the days when social media was first put inside companies, usually using Yammer and these sort of tools. And you can see some good examples there. So to start with a good one, it's the CEO of BT, Ben Verweyen. He was a very good communicator, Dutch by background. And they'd started using, I think it was Yammer, but some sort of forums, discussion forums. And there was these two engineers in India talking about a particular piece of work that they were working on. And then one of the engineers said to the other one, "You'll have to excuse me. You're not going to hear from me for 2 weeks. I'm getting married, so I'm going to be at a wedding." And that's sort of the end of the post. And then underneath then was a little post from Ben Verweyen, from the CEO of BT. I don't know, 65,000 people. I don't know how many thousand people working there at the time, saying, "Hey, fantastic! Congratulations! Really enjoy your wedding. We look forward to seeing you when you come back." And this is on a little post, Lottie, buried down in the guts of the social media side of the internet. And of course, that went viral. The fact that the chief executive was reading a fairly technical post anyway, and then for him to say, wishing someone a happy wedding. There was a trick to it, of course, and that was a thing called a buzz director. And buzz directors are people who worked in BT at the time, and they'd look around at what communities were particularly lively and what posts were very popular. And then she was the she at the time, she'd suggest to the CEO, "Hey, why don't you have a look at this?" So there was a certain amount of cheating involved in it. But that is an example of how, as a leader, if you take part in the comments and even just like a post, that can be incredibly powerful.
For sure. And I think, like you say, there was obviously an element of kind of rehearsal to that, I guess. But I think,
Yeah,
something just as small as a comment from someone like the CEO of a business, it has such a huge impact on that individual. Like, it shows that they care, that they're interested in these
yeah,
things, brings them kind of down from this, I don't know, ivory tower that people might think that they sit in, and that ultimately this is just a person who's congratulating another person on the fact that they're getting married. So there's
yeah.
definitely a lot that can be said for that. And hopefully that takes not too much time for the leader as well. It's not this,
Exactly. Yeah.
massive
Yeah. And it's
contrived
got to be
post.
authentic. It's
Yeah.
got to be his or her words. Yeah.
For sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing that example. Now, I know that you recently became a digital strategist for
I
Simply.
did.
So
Yeah.
congratulations on that one.
Thank you.
But as I mentioned, you've been in the industry for a really long time, and we would, of course, love to capitalize on this experience whilst we have you here. So I'd love if you have any kind of success stories or case studies, even where effective digital communication strategies have led to a significant transformation or an impact that you've seen within an organization, particularly when it comes to that kind of leadership communications lens.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I like to talk about CEOs, leaders who are no longer in position, because as soon as you talk about a CEO who's done something great, who's still in position, they get fired or something goes wrong. So I forgot to talk about ones that are recently retired. So I'm going to talk about Ivan Menezes, who was the
Mhm.
CEO of Diageo until a couple of years ago, because it's a safe story now. He had a great career. And he saw the opportunity through digital to do a digital blog, to do a blog. And what happened was he worked very, very closely with Ruth Kirkhope, who was the comms internal construction at the time. And what she'd do is she'd give him a list of topics.
Mhm.
And because when you're the CEO, you can't actually get a breadth of what's going on in the organization. You go to
Mhm.
board meeting to board meeting. But so she'd give him a list of topics on a regular basis, not a strategy at all. Just say, look, this is a hot topic.
Mhm.
And he would write a blog. And what he did, which was very clever, is he did it on a Sunday night. So when he had time, and when he could reflect on the week, and
Mhm.
also when it could be published, so people could read it on Monday morning.
Mhm.
And it was totally consistent.
Mhm.
He adopted a persona, and basically the strategy was to make him look or appear like, if you met him in the canteen queue, you could say hi, then can can I talk to you? That was the whole idea, to make him accessible.
Hmm.
And so he'd write his blog, and it was long form. He'd write, it could be 1,200 words.
Wow.
And there's something about long form these days, actually, which we're seeing more and more of that
Hmm.
because of everything is pow, 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 pow. If you get the subject right, long form really, really does work. And
Hmm.
we've been seeing that in other organizations like RELX recently. But anyway, the whole thing is because it was a considered human, almost like a column you might read in a Sunday newspaper
Hmm.
type thing, and very personal. And he did it every damn week. He was consistent.
Hmm.
And so to start with, didn't get many reads and so on. But as it went on, it had huge impact. More and more people read it, and it was always aligned and tied into the company strategy.
Hmm.
So I said earlier, our job is to make the important interesting. You know, basically, don't write anything unless it is got something to do with that very, very tight direction that you're going
Hmm.
as a comms team. And if it's not relevant, don't talk about it. If it is relevant, put it out. But
Yeah.
at the end of the blog. So I think Diageo is a good example, and we saw in their financial results and just how well they did, because obviously they were hit during COVID because people weren't going to pubs and restaurants as much, but
Hmm.
they managed to grow the business.
Nice. And I really love that example. And I think CEO blogs are something that we talk about. I've spoken about that as a kind of, often high engagement content type, because again, it's that kind of personalization. It's like a thought piece almost, but it comes from the CEO. It shows that they know what's going on, especially with a long form format
Yes.
also. Is that's where, we don't want a long form format of, a business change that's coming up, because people need to be able to get their heads around it, and they're not necessarily going to read for 10 minutes a change process. But something like a leadership blog, where it is kind of an opinion piece, is a really good way of using that long form format. Love that.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about kind of the good CEO communication so far. I mean, over the years, you've probably experienced various approaches to leadership communication,
Yeah.
perhaps to varying degrees of success. So can you maybe share some insights with us, between what separates the kind of the good, the bad, and even maybe the ugly?
The ugly, yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to talk about an example that some of you will have heard of, because it went viral at the time. And it's a very instructive one. It's about Andy Owen, the CEO of the office furniture giant Miller Knoll. Now, she
Hmm.
runs basically the kit out offices. It's a large, very successful, high brand company. And Andy, so if you want to look her up, it's Andi, Andy Owen.
Hmm.
She was doing a town hall. And it was online, 100 hour and a half town hall, and then she was answering questions at the end of it. And one of the questions at the end was, are we going to make our bonus or not? Because it was tough times, as you can imagine. People were not kitting out offices that much during the
Hmm.
pandemic. Tough times, and they were $26 million short of their target,
Wow.
and she lost it. She lost it, and she says. So I'm quoting, and you can see it online. It's famously online. She says, "While things are tough right now, how can we help our teams stay motivated?" Was the question, and
Hmm.
he said, and her answer was, "Don't ask me what are we going to do if we don't get a bonus. Get the damn 26 million. Spend your time and your effort thinking about the 26 million we need, and not thinking about what you're going to do if you don't get a bonus. All right?" And then she used this phrase about you can visit Pity City, but you can't live there.
Oh.
And
Pity
now, of course,
City.
this was a webinar going out to all staff, and of course, it was recorded, and so it was
Hmm.
leaked, and it went viral, and she was castigated. I mean, it was terrible for her,
I'm not
actually, really
surprised.
awful.
Yeah.
I mean, she got death threats. It was that bad.
Oh gosh.
And when you read interviews about her afterwards, about why she did it,
Hmm.
it's very, very instructive, and it shows you how things can go wrong in the digital sphere. So basically, she's a very calm person. She tends not to lose a rag, but she was told by her comms team, show some emotion, be fiery. We've
Hmm.
got one more quarter to hit target. Give it some oomph. And so the way she gave it oomph was to be aggressive.
Hmm.
Now, if she'd rehearsed it, any comms professional would say, "Oh, no, you're coming across as aggressive,
I
not as
can't be saying that, Andy.
you can't be saying that in Bitty City. You can't say that." And she bitterly regretted it. The share price went down.
Mm,
The biggest problem is that the teams didn't get their bonus, but she did. And
okay.
and so that's one of the big. So it's partly a story about presentation technique. I.e., if
Mm,
someone tells you to do something which you're not used to doing, for God's sake, rehearse it.
hmm
But it's also say and do. So she was saying, don't whinge about not getting your bonuses when she
hmm
was getting £1.3 million bonus that year. So say and do is fundamental, and anybody working in comms knows that you cannot say something which the senior
hmm
team is manifestly not doing.
hmm
But I think it's the reason why she got burnt by it is this is a 1.5 hour town hall, which went very well, and this
hmm
is 90 seconds that went viral.
Yeah.
And the thing about digital is that you've always got to be aware that you're going to get cut down to bite
hmm
size, and you can be really misrepresented that way. So it's almost impossible not to make a mistake, because people can cut things the way that they want to cut
hmm
things. But you do have to. There are no second chances, I suppose, is what I'm saying here.
hmm
So rehearse, 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 and then appear
hmm
to be spontaneous.
Absolutely. And I think there's a bit in there as well. I know it's a phrase that gets banded around quite a lot, is that internal communications is never entirely internal. There's always that risk that someone might be recording something, or, that they aren't going to
Totally.
share those
Yeah.
internal memos. So it's about understanding the impact of that externally as well as internally,
Yeah,
potentially.
yeah. I mean, the advice is never write anything, never record anything that you're not happy to see on the front page of the Financial Times
Hmm
or on
Yeah.
the BBC News.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just have to work to that
Sure.
basis. So, it can make jokes difficult and it can make banter difficult, but
hmm
you just have to work within those constraints, but still be human.
hmm Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And I know now we've kind of touched upon technology specifically. I know it's no kind of mic drop moment for me to say that technology is ever changing. It's changing very
Yeah.
quickly. Although I actually read a statistic this morning, which has really blown my mind, is that 90% of the world's data has been produced in the last 2 years, only in the last 2 years, which is baffling to me. But
Yes.
it really shows you that kind of how much content is being produced all of the time, and that, advancements in technology is allowing us to do this. So,
Yes.
given how quickly everything is changing, particularly when it comes to things like communications platforms, how do we make sure that we're staying ahead of the curve, adopting new tech and kind of weaving that into your digital communication strategy?
Well, extremely good question. I think first of all, as communicators, we have to stay ahead. So you have to be very, very curious. So you do have to read Wired magazine. You do have to read some of the technical stuff. You do have to read what Staffbase publishes, what
Hmm
Microsoft publishes. You have to kind of know what is Microsoft Amplifier. You have to kind of know this stuff,
hmm
and it's a deluge because with AI and Copilot and so on, it's just so much stuff. But you have to stay au courant because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to be in a meeting at some point and someone's going to throw an IC related technical platform at you or question at you which you can't answer, and you'll just look as though you're not doing your job.
hmm
However, large organizations are probably the most conservative thing on earth. They change much slower than other areas of life, like newspapers, television, radio, and so on and so forth. Organizations change very slowly,
hmm
and they kind of change at the speed of the person right in the middle of the organization. Yeah. So although you've got to be aware of all these wonderful devices, when you introduce them, you cannot shove your organization. If you shove your organization,
hmm
you will fail. And every time we've seen this happen, I don't know if you remember, but a workplace like Facebook, when Facebook took their Facebook and put it inside the organization, it was a hell of a shove for a lot of organizations, and it
hmm
failed for that reason. You've got to nudge. So it's about baby steps. You look at what works well, currently in your organization, and you use technology to do more of that. The way to think about digital is like a magnifying glass. So if you put it on things that are good in your organization, you can get more of the good. But if you put it on things that are bad in your organization, you get more of the bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, forums, communities, if they're not properly regulated or set up or trained around, can become whinge fests for places,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when times are hard. So, and also, and this is the interesting thing about AI, is that AI is not going to encourage collaboration. And we all think, oh, this is wonderful. It's going to make us more productive and all the rest of it. Because you used to go to a 3D designer or a 2D designer to design a logo or a poster, there were two minds on that job. Now you just go to Picasso and you put in what you want, and it
Mm-hmm.
produces you, 4 or 5 versions until you see what you want, and then you put it up there. Great. It costs you a fraction of the money. You do it in a fraction of the time, but it's actually your idea magnified, not two
Mm-hmm.
people's ideas magnified. And what's going to happen with AI, and we already see it in internal comms, is we'll see managers using generative AI to write articles, and they won't involve IC at all,
Mm-hmm.
or they won't involve other people. They'll just say, "Oh well, AI kind of knows what other people are saying, so why do I have to go and talk to the other people?" And so
Mm-hmm.
what AI will do, is one way of saying it, is it's going to reinforce silos, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
bad thing for any business. And so what we have to do in IC is that we have to work very, very hard as AI is introduced to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we're still working across. And that's where a digital workplace is so important. I mean, if you're an organization that's running off email plus AI, you're just going to get you know, email on steroids. It's going to just go
Mm-hmm.
through. So it's very, very important that companies, before they invest in AI, they invest in a digital workplace. I can't stress that enough, because
Mm-hmm.
only in digital workplaces do you get this cross fertilization and
Mm-hmm.
collaboration. As well as communicating from top down and better listening and so on. You get this side to side communication.
Mm-hmm.
So baby steps. Baby
Baby
steps is the way
steps.
to go. Put in a digital platform first before you put in AI.
For sure. And actually something that you mentioned there, you talked about silos a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess with remote working becoming more and more popular, and teams kind of being scattered globally, how do you see the role of digital communication evolving in the future, particularly when it comes to maybe deskless workers, remote workers, and what opportunities do you see there?
Well, I think it's going to take away a lot of our drudge work. So, for instance, I mean, as an IC professional, it comes around with regular. You sort of, I can't be time for the town hall again. Surely not. Oh, it's the sales conference again. Oh no, it's the awards thing again. And you look at it and you think, oh, dearie me, Groundhog Day. AI can really help you now, because you can take everything, all the documentation, whether it was the microsite, whether it's your schedule, whether it's your budget. You can use AI now to recreate that, bring it up to date for your next one. So 80% of the slog can be done like that immediately. Now, that means that you've suddenly got more time to be creative.
Hmm.
And I think what AI will mean for IC folk is that it will take away the logistical side of our work and the day-to-day drudgery of our work, and it will give us much more time to really focus on that. How do we land that message? How do we get people to read that article?
Hmm.
How do we get people to go to that event or to watch that webinar? And it's all about better headlines, better photography, better writing,
Hmm.
um, all those things. And obviously, when you're in a personalized environment, it's about taking that message and rewriting it for the different audiences and the different media.
Hmm.
That's absolutely critical.
Nice. And I think it's a really important point, that creativity, particularly from, I know personally from my own perspective, that part of the reason I enjoy being in internal communications is that element of creativity. But a lot of the time, we know we're talking about firefighting and there's a lot of operational comms that we need to get out that leaves us less time for that creativity. So the fact that
Yes.
we can use AI to do more of that stuff so that we
Yeah.
can be more creative is music to my ears, of course. So
It's
bringing in
tougher as well. They'll say it's tougher because being creative is not easy. I can write you a boring article very quickly. But and also writing short stuff, that's is the famous letter that's been ascribed to Mark Twain and George Bernard Shaw and Pascal and everyone, which is he writes a letter and says, "I apologise about the length of this letter. I didn't have time to write you a short one." And that it
Yeah,
takes time to edit, it takes time to
yeah,
refine, and
yeah,
haikus are the hardest things to write.
yeah,
They
yeah.
take longer than any other
Sure,
kind of.
that's such a good point. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. It's that shorter stuff that you're like, am I still getting everything in there? Like, am I getting this
Yeah,
across right? It's that really long form of stuff that I'm like, cool, I can put all these words on a page and I don't have to be conscious about that. Yeah, totally right. I've never thought of it that way before. I'm going to find that a lot harder now. I'm recognizing it.
that's right. Well, long form, as we said earlier, for people who are mavens, i.e., people who've got something very interesting to say, then they're specialists in your organisation or they're the
Hmm.
CEO, and you want to hear what she's going to, what she's saying. But for com stuff, for our stuff, keep it tight and
Hmm.
keep it interesting.
Hmm. Fab. And then bringing it all back round to that kind of leadership communications, we've talked about kind of user focused communications. So, from an internal communicator's perspective, is there anything that we can be doing specifically to kind of support leadership to
Yeah.
help with that hyper personalization, user focused comms, digital strategies stuff?
Yeah, we did. We were working with Unilever, and Paul Polman was the CEO, a very, very successful CEO of
Hmm.
Unilever, and he wrote a blog. And he was getting, it does okay. It's about 9,000 reads a month. It's a monthly blog. And okay, in a large organization, 150,000, I think 9,000 is not many, but actually 9,000 is a lot of people if they're taking interest in what you're saying. That's
Hmm.
9,000 people in an organization. So that's a lot of
Hmm.
influence. Yeah. And so we analyzed his blogs over the years, and he did 30 of them. And well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you an example, and here's a test for you, Lottie.
Oh gosh, put me on the
I'll
spot
put
now.
you. I'm going to read you the opening paragraphs of two of his blogs, and you can tell me which one you think got more
Okay.
reads. So here, this one: why change and innovation go hand in hand? Classic sort of blog subject, isn't it?
Hmm.
Innovations are the lifeblood of any company. They help differentiate you from others, respond to consumers' unmet needs, and ultimately generate the margins needed for a company to guarantee its future. Innovation comes in many forms in every industry. In women's apparel, Zara's fast fashion certainly talks about innovation, which is a
Hmm.
very legitimate thing to talk about when you're running Unilever. Okay, that's number one. Number two, survival of the fastest. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most adaptable to change. This quotation is often attributed to Darwin. I saw firsthand the full truth of this observation last winter when I visited the remarkable Galapagos Islands, which played such a major role in the formation of Darwin's theory of natural selection. So, which do you think got more readers? Survival of the fastest or innovation?
I'm thinking, I really don't want to be wrong here, but I'm thinking the survival of the fastest. And
Absolutely correct.
okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to tell you my reasoning. Yeah, tell me if I'm correct again. That I think that one to me seemed, I don't know, it was a bit more corporate BS kind of, it was quite
Yeah,
long and it felt like it needed to be edited to a human being that was
yeah,
talking about it. Whereas the second one was much more personal experience. It just grabbed me
absolutely.
in a
Yeah.
different way.
I saw firsthand the truth of this observation. And obviously, there's a picture of him on holiday with his wife in the
Love
Galapagos
that.
Islands.
Yeah.
And people want to kind of know a bit, not just about the personal lives of their leaders, but they also, because it's not cheap to go to the Galapagos Islands. It's quite a expensive holiday. They also quite like the glamour
Hmm.
of that. And if I work for a company, I don't want to work for someone who says, "Well, I didn't go on holiday this summer. I spent the whole time doing double analysis of our." No, you want to like, yeah, I flew off to the Galapagos Islands and looked at
Got
turtles,
to play
and
hard. Yeah.
and that's personality and brio, and we see it with Branson, obviously, is so important in leadership.
Hmm.
Is to
Hmm.
portray yourself not just as a human being, but a human being that I would quite like to, to have a chat with.
Hmm.
and would aspire to. And I think that's what Pullman did particularly well. And so, they tracked it very closely, and that got like 30% more reads
Hmm.
than the other one did. And so then he really went to town on, because as a CEO, you travel around a lot, and he'd talk about his journeys, and he'd talk about what happened in Saudi Arabia. We went to the ice cream factory. It's interesting. I want to know about this
Hmm.
stuff. So personal, emotional
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
Okay. Well done. I
Thank
can see
you.
you worried there.
you,
I can see the
you
panic
really
in your
got
eyes.
you really got me panicked for a bit there, but I'm glad. I'm glad I was right. Well, I mean, we're really close to how much we've got time for, Mark, and I'm sure that we could carry on going for an awful lot longer. So, if people are feeling totally inspired by what we've been speaking about today, where could they hear more from you, from the Simply team? Where can I go?
Well, first of all, we've got Simply IC, the Festival of Internal Comms. That's coming up
Hmm.
May 20th and 21st in London.
Hmm.
It's a wonderful event. I really like this one because it's one where we go into multi-stream. So we start
Hmm.
with a plenary, but then we divide into 3 streams. So you're in groups of, it's about 300 people there, but you're in smaller groups
Hmm.
in the streams. And you can really choose what you want to hear about. And it's a bit more intimate, and it's quite a fun one. And Staffbase will be there. You're a platinum sponsors.
I
So
will
I
be there
guess,
personally.
hurrah, go for it. So I'm looking forward to that. And
Hmm.
then in the autumn, November, we have Simply EXP. Now, that's the one which really focuses on technology.
Hmm.
We're taking a larger venue, and we're really very excited about that because not only our digital workplace is taking off, but obviously AI is taking off. And so we'll
Hmm.
be featuring a lot of good examples of how AI is being used in internal comms there. So that's what it is. Or obviously subscribe to our newsletter, join our community, and we'd love to talk to you there. We have a great community where people can ask each other
Hmm.
questions. It's very, very lively indeed. But it's great to see face to face if you're if you can get to London. We are
Hmm.
looking to do events. We did one in Amsterdam last year. We're looking to do events in the States this year. So
Cool.
we are getting out and about. Thanks to we're now part of Gallagher, and Gallagher
Hmm.
obviously a global company. So it does give us the opportunity to go out. So we'll probably do Chicago this year and other parts of North America.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll see if I can get myself a ticket to Chicago as well, a bit
Absolutely.
further afield.
Yeah.
Fab. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been great having you on. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed this episode of the Aspire to Inspire podcast, and be sure to join us again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye now.